We're all familiar with Jim Clark, considered by many, including myself, to be one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. The gentleman, the farm boy from Fife, the man who took on Graham Hill, Bruce McLaren and John Surtees. He was a man known for gaining the respect of those he drove against. And at the time of his death, he held many records, including most wins, most pole positions, and most Grand Slams in a single season. And he showed no signs that he wouldn't extend his tally and his records, if not for one fateful day in West Germany. Clark was born on the 4th of March 1936 at his family's farmhouse in Fife. He had 4 older sisters and no brothers. When he was 6, he and his family moved to Berwickshire, near the border with England. He attended prep school for several years and had a minor talent for cricket. He began driving the family car around the fields, and from the beginning he had that natural talent for racing that comes rarely in a generation. By the time he was 17, he had left school and had committed to full-time farm work. Despite his parents' opposition, Clark started racing in local hill climbing events, driving in his own car, a Sunbeam Talbot. He was quickly recognised for his prodigious talent and skill behind the wheel. With the encouragement of his friends, he began competing in club races. In his first event in Crimmen, Scotland, on June 16, 1956, he was driving a DKW Sonder class. Just 2 years later, he was driving in national events, racing for the Border Reivers team owned by Ian Scott Winston. Clark would win 18 races that year, in Jag, D-types and Porsches. In a race on Boxing Day that year, Clark raced against none other than Colin Chapman, founder of Lotus Racing and his future boss. In a 10-lap GT race at Brands Hatch, Clark, in a Lotus Elite, came in second to Chapman. The fact that he was in an identical car to Chapman was enough to impress the man so much that he offered Clark a place in the Lotus Formula Junior team. Now this was the beginning of one of the most famous and formidable driver-team pairings in Formula One, as Clark had impressed so much in the junior team that he was promoted to Team Lotus halfway through the 1960 Formula One season. The man he had replaced, John Surtees, had gone to the Isle of Man to compete in the famous TT motorcycle race, and Clark was deemed an acceptable replacement. His first race, at the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, ended in retirement, with engine failure on lap 49. His second race, at the legendarily fast and dangerous Spa-Francorchamps, yielded a fantastic 5th place finish, a race in which Clark was, quote, scared stiff pretty much all through the race. He would go on to achieve his debut podium finish 3 races later. 1961 was his first full season in Formula One, and despite 2 podiums and his teammate Innes Ireland winning in the same car, the Lotus 21, Clark would have to wait until the next season for his debut victory. In 1962, armed with the revolutionary Lotus 25, Clark began what was the peak of his career. The 25 had the first fully stressed monocoque chassis in Formula One, giving the car unrivaled strength and rigidity, while also being constructed out of aluminium, making it as lightweight as possible. This combination of strength and lightness proved to be nigh unstoppable in the right hands, and Clark would soon be regarded as the best talent seen in Formula One since Fangio. Unfortunately, reliability was not the strong point of the Lotus 25, and although he achieved 3 wins, 6 pole positions and 5 fastest laps, he was all but guaranteed the title that year, if not for an oil leak in the last race, handing the title to Graham Hill. 1963 was a record-setting year for Clark, having racked up 7 wins out of 10 races, the most ever in a season until 1988. The fact that there was only 1 race that year that Clark didn't finish in the top 6 was indicative of his talent, and that was only due to a gearbox failure at Monaco, then the season opener. It was his first title and a dominant display, having finished a full 25 points ahead of his nearest rival, defending champion Graham Hill. Despite a great start to the season in 1964, with the Lotus 25 delivering 3 wins in 5, the title once again slipped through the Scots' fingers when he switched to the unrefined and unreliable Lotus 33. He would finish their year in 3rd place behind Hill and Surtees. Despite its unreliability, the 33 came good next season, with the race victory right off the bat at the 65 season opener in South Africa. 5 more race victories followed, and another title was sewn up, and Clark was already on his way to breaking Fangio's record of 24 wins and 29 poles. At the end of just his 4th full season in Formula One, Clark had already racked up 19 race victories and 25 pole positions. 1966, however, was a disappointing year to say the least, with Clark driving around the problems with the V8 engines in his 33 until the 3-litre Lotus 43 was ready. He could only manage a third place until the 43 arrived and allowed him to claim victory in the penultimate race of the season. He finished the year 6th in the standings with only 16 points, his lowest finish since his rookie campaign. He nearly left Lotus that year, having deliberately kept his contracts to a year at a time. Thankfully, 1967 saw the introduction of the Lotus 49, the car that essentially set the blueprint for all F1 cars that followed. With the engine bolted to the monocoque at one end and the suspension and gearbox to the other, it essentially became part of the chassis itself. Again, like the 25, it was stronger and more rigid than its competitors, though like its predecessors, it suffered poor reliability. However, Clark and the 49 won the first race it entered, and despite 3 further victories and a third place, Clark would be unable to win the driver's crown that year in what would prove to be his final title challenge. Throughout his career, Clark had gained a reputation as one of the most naturally talented drivers in the history of the sport. It was because of this that many believed that he was invincible on the track, and that it would never be him to lose his life during a race. They would, sadly, be proved wrong on April 7th, 1968. After winning what turned out to be his final and record-setting race victory at the opening event of the season in South Africa, there was a 4-month gap until the next race in Spain. Clark had entered a Formula 2 race that day, along with several of his F1 competitors, as was the norm at the time. Now, the current Hockenheim track is greatly shortened compared to the old circuit, which wound through the woods for about 4 kilometres with no barriers or safety equipment for almost the entire forest section. At the time, there was no chicanes or anything apart from a grass strip separating the track from the trees along its edge. Known for being an extremely fast and taxing circuit for cars and drivers, the thrill of Hockenheim was there for both the spectators in the stadium section and for the drivers pushing their cars to the limit. Clark was originally meant to drive in a sports car race at Brands Hatch, but instead chose to drive for Lotus in the Formula 2 race at the Hockenheimring, largely due to contractual obligations with Firestone. Team Lotus drivers Graham Hill and Clark were in the Gold Leaf Team Lotuses, and a young Max Mosley was also there, moving up from the Clubman Series. The event was run in 2 heats, and in the first heat, Clark hadn't started very well, and he seemed unhappy, according to a race official. He had made his way through the stadium section 4 times and was running in 8th place. By the time the other cars had come around for the 5th time, his mechanic Dave Sims noticed that Clark was not among them, and becoming concerned, he heard reports of a crash on the other side of the circuit, though none among him believed that it could have been Clark that had crashed, instead assuming that maybe he had stopped to assist another driver. In reality, the worst had happened. As his Lotus emerged from the Shrimp's Head curve and was racing down the straight, the accident happened. Chris Owen, another British entry who was driving about 250 yards behind Clark, had said afterwards, quote, "Suddenly Jim's car broke out. It looked like something mechanical," end quote. The rear wheels failed to hold the road as he came out of the bend. Clark fought to keep the car on the road as it weaved for 500 yards along the track and grass safety strip. A policeman later said the car left the track and somersaulted 3 or 4 times before smashing broadside into trees. Clark suffered a broken neck and a skull fracture and died before reaching the hospital. The cause of the crash was never formally identified, but the most likely cause was believed to be a deflating rear tyre. It was felt strongly among the racing community that it couldn't have been Clark's fault due to his immense driving skill. Now, his death affected the racing community enormously. His friends Graham Hill, Dan Gurney, Jackie Stewart and John Surtees, among others, were personally and deeply affected by their friend's sudden death. Colin Chapman himself was devastated and stated publicly that he'd lost his best friend. The 1968 Drivers' Championship was later won by his friend and Lotus teammate Graham Hill, who pulled the heartbroken team together and held off Jackie Stewart for the crown. He would dedicate his crown to Jim Clark. Jim Clark was not the first racing driver to die doing his job, and he wouldn't be the last. However, it was the loss of such a great talent, the one who they all believed would never be the one to lose his life, that shocked the community into action. His fellow driver, Chris Amon, had reportedly said, quote, "If it could happen to him, what chance do the rest of us have? I think we all felt that. It seemed like we'd lost our leader. At the time, safety was beginning to come to the fore, led by Jackie Stewart, among others, and this terrible event led to an increase in the use of safety barriers, runoff areas, and gravel traps in order to reduce the danger of veering off track in the future. Of course, there was much more work to be done, and unfortunately, Clark wouldn't be the last world champion to die during a race, as nearly 26 years later, Ayrton Senna, the man whose talent was considered second only to Clark's, lost his life after veering off track. This crash was another where it was widely assumed that the car, not the driver, was to blame. Still to this day, Jim Clark is near or at the top of many former driver and fans' list of the greatest drivers ever to grace the sport, and while his immense talent and skill can't be questioned, it was his kindness and his quiet nature that set him apart from the rest. And because of that, to this day, he's known as the Quiet Champion. Just wanted to say a quick thanks for watching this video, and to everybody who's subscribed to my channel in the past couple of months. It's immense. I never thought I'd get even that many, especially on my other videos. The views are incredible, so really thank you for that. And yeah, expect to see more videos like this in the future. I'm not sure how often I can make them, but I will try and get them out as regularly as I can. Again, thank you for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you want more.